Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. It's time for us to talk about the one and only faction from BattleTech. The best, most well-known faction that everybody's a fan of, everybody's heard about, everybody's talked about. There's no even no point in me making this video, because you've seen too many about this faction already. No, I'm kidding. This is like one of the most obscure factions. There's like maybe 5 videos, and mine will probably end up being the most popular. But no, this is obviously a video about the Marian Hegemony. So this will mostly just be covering the history. Thankfully, it's a pretty brief faction, pretty short faction. Again, a faction I love. They're probably my favorite faction in the whole BattleTech. But again, not pretty brief, not too much on them. Enough for me to make a little less than probably 20-minute video. So just to kind of start it out with a bang, we'll do pre and post 3025 era, the pirate era, when the hegemony was a simple 10 systems, truly deserving in the name Bandit Kingdom. But within what seemed like a band of pirates germinated a culture and the means to creating a true nation state that forces its recognition upon the rest of the inner sphere by rule of might alone. Not a whole lot is happening in this era for the faction. They are still incredibly new and have not developed any serious culture that display later on in the setting that makes them so interesting. But there's a interesting little thing that I like to think if you're a mech warrior DM. Think of them in this era as the Caesar's Legion of BattleTech. They're not quite at the level of a legitimate, we're the Roman kingdom, but in BattleTech kind of, era of legitimacy, right? Everybody, they speak of them, they're like Caesar's Legion. They're like a bunch of, weirdos LARPing, right? They don't have any kind of serious stakes. Whereas later on, again, after you've been here for almost a century, there's a legitimacy to you hanging around. So we move on to the 3050s era. But that's what I like about 3025, is you can play the hegemony like that, and it can lead to a lot of interesting stuff. But, so the 3050s era. It is around this time that the superstructure of the Marian government is truly fleshed out, and the term Bandit Kingdom falls flat on its face. It's in this era of the 3050s that we see the hegemony more or less accepted as the fourth major periphery power. While they don't benefit from the advancement of tech that the clans introduce, mostly to being in the rimward periphery, and again, not anywhere near the clans during the age, they also don't suffer the carnage and destruction to the infrastructure into their industrial bases that, like, say, the Lyrans do. And it kind of helps them also with being a faction whenever they don't get immediately quashed by the clans. Rosselhog. So. We go to the FedCom Civil War and the Jihad. The FedCom Civil War is where, in my opinion, a lot of the lore begins to jump the proverbial diamond shark. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Not to get into here with the hegemony, because the lore is actually pretty okay for the hegemony during the FedCom Civil War. We see them absorb 2 bandit kingdoms, both of them being Lothian and Aurelia. Now, whether they're really bandit kingdoms, that's kind of up to debate, but I really don't care for either of these factions. They're kind of just there for the Marian hegemony to eat. But yeah, they have fans somehow. I don't really get that. But Lothia has a significant rebellion, and the Aurelian conquests I know have a lot of kind of written, not a lot written about them, but enough written about them that you can do something with it in the game if you want to play kind of a mech warrior campaign around that. But the Marian hegemony does win lore-wise for these wars. The Marian hegemony ends up spreading to both of these states. And the Jihad. So the Jihad's like a golden age for the hegemony. Again, you're hot off 2 periphery conquests that not only boosted prestige and reputation of the MHAF, but also catapulted House O'Reilly into the spotlight of the inner sphere politics. Again, unlike in the past where his dictates were largely ignored or, mocked, no one's laughing when the hegemony's armies marching with the coalition to burn Crincinius to the ground. They're there, they're carving out loot from the Crincinius worlds. And again, taking out Ward of Blake. I mean, they're doing stuff. But then the Dark Age happens, which again, you can use that for maybe 4 factions. The Dark Age happens, and then everything turned to shit. But whoever's writing for the Marian hegemony during the Jihad was clearly not the person making decisions for them during the Dark Age. For some reason, they abandon the Crincinian worlds that they win. They allow Lothia to basically secede, really without a shot fired, and with one of the legions to break off. And to cap off the train of brilliant moves, big brain geopolitical strategies used by House O'Reilly in the seeming 30 years or 40 years, 50 years, however the Dark Age lasts, they decide to attack the Free Worlds League. Former Free Worlds League, Tamaran Abbey. I make it sound more stupid than it really was, but even in the context of the immediate Ill Clan and late Dark Age, it was still a really, really stupid idea to attack Tamaran Abbey. Largely a disaster for the Marian Hegemony. Again, probably the first war they outright lose, where they outright just get smacked with no recourse or no kind of intervention. Even in the prior with Lothia and Aurelia, where they kind of get their ass kicked a lot, but they still win. Not with Tamaran Abbey. They lose, and they lose hard. And that brings us, that brings us to the Ill Clan era, and specifically Empire alone, because I don't think they're going to be in any other source book besides the one that's affecting the Free Worlds League. Again, not a faction that deserves way more attention, but will never get its own independent source books or individual kind of things. But it leads us to the Ill Clan era. With the defeat of the Northern Legions to Fontaine Merrick, you have to learn these new characters' names. The shaky alliance between Canopus and Capella with the Marian Hegemony falls apart, again, for obvious reasons, when you kind of just give them some mechs and then you say, hey, yeah, we'll totally also attack the Free Worlds League, and then you don't attack the Free Worlds League whenever the Marian Hegemony does. It's going to piss off the Hegemony, of course. So that falls apart. Also, Ignatius needed someone to blame, pretty much besides himself, because if he didn't blame the Canopus or the Capellans, he would have had a rebellion, and that would have not been good for House O'Reilly, because they're pretty shaky right now. So Ignatius basically sends a raiding party to punish Canopus. It's not quite successful. One of the parties is successful. Two of the other parties get basically destroyed. Although one of them gets the manpower back, the other one gets completely destroyed. Again, kind of reinforcing the point that fighting against Canopus, they can't outright win that frontal battle. Even with how far the Marian Hegemony's come as a faction, Canopus's industrial base and military might is still dwarfs the Marian Hegemony's. And the Marian Hegemony's they're not a slouch either. They've got a decent military. It's just not, again, Canopus is Canopus at this point. They're largely a power player in the region, mostly because the Taurian Concordat's been completely destroyed. House Liao is very resurgent, and Andurian's become a balkanized province, and it just leads the magistracy to be in a very powerful geopolitical position. But within their position is also weakness, because they're married to the fortunes of House Liao, and their ruling house, the Centrellas, are largely more focused on the Capella Confederation than the Magistracy of Canopus, which is a problem, because a lot of people in the Magistracy of Canopus absolutely hate House Liao and the Capellan Confederation. So while the Marian Hegemony at first glance looks like it might be a complete disaster for them to, go to war with Magistracy of Canopus, and if they play it defensively and they're able to buy enough time, they can probably outright win that war. And even get concessions out of the Magistracy of Canopus, so that they can get the hegemony out of their hair and then move on to bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And that's kind of my immediate prediction for what's going to happen later on in the Ill Clan era. But we have yet to see that. Those source books aren't out yet. And whenever those source books are out, I will be revisiting, not this video, I'll make a follow-up video, but I'll be referencing it for sure. But again, as it goes, that is it largely for the Marian Hegemony. They're, again, not a whole hell of a lot for the faction. They're a pretty small amount of lore. Again, for a very interesting faction. I haven't gone over exactly all the culture and all that. Not that there's a whole hell of a lot, but again, what is there, interesting. I really like it, and if you flesh it out in the right ways, I think they can actually become one of the more fascinating cultures within BattleTech. They really have a chance to shine here. And I hope that the writers don't, like Rosselhog, kind of snuff them out before they're even really begun. But that being said, I will catch you all on the next one, guys, and have a good one, and, Godspeed.